Hello and welcome to our very first session of the 2021 International Youth Conference. My name is Rebecca Hardenbrook and I will be moderating our panel, Youth and Climate Action, Drive Ideas into Action. I'd like to start off by thanking all of the amazing guests from the opening ceremony, as well as all of you who are tuning in today from around the world to hear global leaders discuss issues most pertinent to the youth. Our world and its climate are in a state of crisis. Predictions from climate scientists from around the world overwhelmingly describe a devastating future unless humankind changes its ways. A combination of global and local level action is required of us now if we hope to save our planet for future generations. In this session, we will hear from global climate activists and professionals about how they have turned small ideas into actions and how they are trying to make a change, why collaboration between youth is necessary to combat the climate crisis, and what you can do in your global and local communities to take action. I'd now like to give each of our speakers a few minutes to introduce themselves and their work. We'll start with Amanda Neshawat, then go to Miroslav Polzer, then Uswa Zainab, and last but not least, Marie-Claire Graf. And I'll turn the time over to Amanda.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks so much for the invite. It's so cool to see how many people around the world are tuning into this. So hello from the United States. I'm in New Jersey. My name is Amanda Neshawat, and I am the Deputy Director of Sustainability and Community Outreach for the Hudson County Improvement Authority. That's basically a county agency, a government agency that is in New Jersey. And I've actually been working in New Jersey with communities trying to achieve their sustainability goals with them for the past 10 years. So I've done some really great work with people in communities and important stakeholders, such as working to increase solar access for low-income families and senior citizens, working to create community gardens, to create better access to fresh foods and utilize land and open space better. And I've also helped to increase recycling and try and solve waste issues in communities, small and large, here in New Jersey. So I'm really excited to hear the perspectives from everyone else on the panel and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
And now we'll turn the time over to Miro. Miro, I believe you're muted.
So, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, welcome everyone. Greetings from Austria. I'm the Executive Director of the International Association for the Advancement of Innovative Approaches to Global Challenges and the Chairperson of the Board of Directors of GLOCHA, Global Challenges Foundation, New York. And we are proud and happy to be somehow the fiscal sponsors of the Generation Next Youth Network and somehow enabler of today's conference. And it's very important for us to be on this panel about climate action and how we turn ideas into action, because it's the main goal of my organization and the GLOCHA partnership to work in this field. We have three pillars through which we enable citizens and especially youth to take action for sustainable development goals and especially for climate action. And these three pillars are culture, technology, and organization. And here this topic of organization and knowledge and innovation, that's the focus where I want to place today some focus. The points, the contribution that I want to make is to help to identify innovation spaces in which young people can come in, help to be pathfinders for their societies towards a climate neutral future and really to create an ecosystem which helps everyone to connect with knowledge, with technology, with funding, with the necessary social energy and social structures locally and globally to take action. And here we have on the European level as an identified innovation space, the European Climate Pact. And there was an event yesterday in which also Ali and also Marie-Claire have presented wonderfully youth perspectives. And the other innovation space is Action for Climate Empowerment, a policy area within the UNFCCC process that aims to empower everyone for climate action with education, training, public awareness, public participation, public access to information, and international cooperation on these matters. And I might share some more details about this and what we're doing in this field in the course of the panel later.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mira. We'll now turn the time over to Uswa.
Can you hear me good?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? All right. Thank you very much. Good day, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or evening, depending on which part of the world you're in right now. Thank you for giving me the floor, Rebecca. I'm honored and so excited to be here. I'm Uswa Bennett, as Rebecca mentioned. I am a social media and climate change activist based in Pakistan, and I have my efforts in mobilizing the youth of Pakistan through my social media platforms for climate change and moving towards sustainable methods to tackle with this problem, this global problem of climate change. I have started some of my own projects for climate action. One of them entails moving towards sustainable methods of business on grassroots levels so that we may together move towards a greener economy. And another entails stimulating the youth of Pakistan to, in their own individual capacities, move towards better methods. For instance, replacing decorating their houses with paper flags, miniature paper flags of Pakistan on the Independence Day by planting a seed or sowing a seed so that it may grow into a tree, so that you may decorate that tree with other sustainable methods of decoration. And these are only a few to mention. And then again, I'm honored and thankful to have been made a part of this panel. And I look forward to sharing my ideas, getting feedback on them, and then learning about your ideas, and to have an overall a very great learning experience. And with that, I would conclude my initial remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Uswa. And finally, Marie-Claire, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. My name is Marie-Claire, and I'm coming from Switzerland, but I'm also here to represent a global movement. So when I'm talking, I'm not talking particularly always about myself, but also about the bigger picture. So I'm the global focal point of Youngo. Youngo is a word combination between youth and NGO. And what we are the official youth constituency to the UN process on climate change. So we have a formal seat within some of the processes and negotiations, and we can make our voices heard through the official negotiations. So this is what Youngo is doing, and every year there are 2 focal points who are liaisoning with different stakeholders. Nevertheless, I mean, the community is around 10,000 people. So of course the community lives with the people who are within the network. And so this is like, yeah, the network I'm hereby representing, but nevertheless, like also back home in Switzerland, where I'm based, I'm working a lot with the government and trying to be a bridge between the young people and the governmental agencies to hopefully be able to increase the efforts around climate change, because despite Switzerland might be one of the very ambitious countries, we still have a lot to do, a lot of homework to do in our home. And of course, we have to be very faster moving to net zero. Hopefully we will soon aim for net zero by 2030 and not by 2050, because as a country who has been living on a very, very good footprint, we have, of course, a larger responsibility. So this is some of my engagements, and yeah, looking very much forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Marie-Claire. So now we're going to shift into a Q&A portion. We have some pre-drafted questions for our speakers today. In the case that we might have some extra time, please feel free to put any questions you might have for our speakers in the chat. We may or may not get to them, but this would also stimulate a great discussion, I think, with other attendees who are here today. So my first question for you all is, what is our role as the youth of the world in this fight against climate change? Where do we position ourselves in this fight? And maybe we'll start with Uswa.
Thank you for getting back to me, Rebecca. So, climate change, our substantive topic of discussion today, is truly, I believe, a global challenge, you see. With just like COVID-19, which is also a global challenge, climate change, just like COVID-19, poses an equal threat to every living being without any discrimination of developed or developing or underdeveloped economies or ethnicities or nations. It affects every living being equally. Now, climate change, just like COVID-19, is also an invisible lethal murderer. But the difference strikes in when we see that COVID-19 shows us, very evident and very immediate destruction in the form of visible deaths. But climate change is sort of a looming threat that is just beginning to show us initial signs of its potential destruction gradually, but hasn't shown us the full potential apocalypse that it could bring about. So you see, it's like watching a sports competition as a spectator. When your team loses or is about to lose, you can't really do anything about it, but you really want to be a part of bringing about victory to your team. So I think and by that, what I essentially mean to indicate is that everyone amongst us, everyone who has basic knowledge, knows that environmental damage is a looming death. And even if you sort your house garbage in plastic in one place, paper in one place, and glass in one place, you would be playing a role that is, unless it is taken up at a mass level and this behavioral consciousness and change is brought about at a mass level, it is unlikely to be very significant in stemming climate change. So what is needed right now is a proper mechanism. What is needed right now is, you see, the developed countries or the developed economies need to provide assistance and guidance to developing countries in this regard. What is needed right now is a radical change in the ways we carry out our routine activities. What is needed is to move towards a greener economy with greener employment. And for that is needed investment in individual capacity building of the population. And for that is needed investment in the population, right? And then again, it brings me to the point that developed economies need to help developing countries that are only just beginning to realize the effects of climate change. And ironically, these are the populations of these very developing countries that are going to be affected by it the most. So I think, as you've asked me, what is the role that youth can play? I think I recently came up with this idea or scheme or project, whatever you want to call it. It Since we have a limitation of time, I will summarize it all for you. It essentially revolves around helping small scale businesses or any other business for that matter, which has a physical existence and uses power consumption and has carbon emissions into the environment, helping them move online so that we may together move towards a greener economy. So that is essentially an idea which could, one, it could help businesses, small scale businesses which were forced into bankruptcy because of the lockdowns that resulted from COVID. It would help make startups easier for new entrepreneurs. And on the third point, it would reduce the energy consumptions by physical workplaces and reduce the carbon emissions they emit into the environment. So I think moving online, and not even in form of business, even if we make our usual online communications online and make that mainstream, that would also be a great leap towards moving a greener environment in an overall stimulation. So I think, as you've asked me, what is the role that you think youth can play? I think I've said it multiple times at multiple places, and I'll say it again, that more than half of the population of the earth is youth. Yet the global average age of a parliamentarian is 53. And it effectively highlights how youth is nowhere a central part of political decision making. And at the same time, technology is youth's greatest weapon, as youth is twice more connected and digitalized online. And at the same time, it cannot be denied that the ideas that youth has to offer are revolutionary. And so, in my opinion, youth has a major part to play in bringing about the change in this lethal problem. You see, deteriorating situations we are seeing today aren't a result of something someone did yesterday. It is a result of what previous generations have been doing 30 or 50 or 70 years ago. And so today, the steps that we're going to take are going to bear results not tomorrow, but 30 or 50 or 70 years from now. So, with youth revolutionary ideas, if they have a mechanism to reach to the authorities and give their message, they can truly revolutionize ideas, and they could help suggest mechanisms that could help stem this problem, if not reverse it. So I think with that, I would address my initial question that yes, youth has a great role to play, and that is my stance on it. And what is needed right now is proper mechanisms to help them achieve their goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Swa. Marie-Claire, I'm curious to hear your perspective on this as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rebecca, and also thank you so much, Uzma, because I, of course, fully agree with everything what you have been saying, and this is, of course, very, very crucial, and I just want to expand on the point you mentioned about the implementation or the inclusion of young people also in decision-making processes, because this is what we are seeing, like Yango has mentioned, is the network which is already quite privileged. We are allowed to go to the rooms, to the negotiations, we are allowed to make interventions and submissions. Nevertheless, as long as young people are still sitting in the second row, we can never have true inclusion. It's young people, it's our right to be heard, it's our right to be included in the decision making, and it's our right to be sitting at the place when decisions are taken. Of course, we are not yet there, and I think this is at least one point we have to push forward, but also like the time is very, very limited. So we cannot only wait until like the very old, sorry for this like framing, but very often very old decision makers finally realize that maybe they can't do it alone, or maybe they are just like going out of office because they are like too old. Because like by then, like the time is too late, right? We can't wait until we are in this decision-making positions when everything is working in this very slow pace how it's going at the moment. So we have to use different techniques and strategies to make it in time, because if we would have 100 years left, okay, well, we can try, but we don't have. So we have essentially 9 years left to make this, to make the climate, to revert the climate change and the climate crisis. So we can use formal avenues of engagement, as we are doing at Yango, as we are doing in other spaces as well, but also try on a local, on a country level, to engage with decision makers, that we can try not only on the international space to penetrate the system, to get young people meaningfully included, with meaningful I mean like that they are part of decision making and not only sitting in a second row and can, if they want, make an input, and if the others want to listen to them, maybe like listen to them, but they're really like in the heart and have been part of the decision making. So we also like need to do a lot of work back home in our countries to approach them. But of course, this can be very challenging, as Uzma, you also mentioned. It's not always easy to approach decision makers. Here in Switzerland, we do have the privilege to be able to approach them. Nevertheless, it's also very challenging. There are a lot of biases against young people that, oh, you're young, how can you even make a contribution? You haven't been as long on this planet as we have been. So we also, of course, like we have been like huge climate strikes around the planet. I think it's also really essential to put or create pressure movements out of the existing structures already, to show that we are absolutely frustrated, angry, and not happy how things are going on. So I think we need to have several aspects and several engaged, but I think it's very important that we are strategic about it, because we cannot lose another decade of not being strategic and everyone is doing something random and everyone thinks alone I can do it. No, because we can't. I mean, we have still a system which is limiting us and which is not letting us like be engaged how we want to be engaged. So we have to be strategic, but we have to use all the avenues at the same time. We cannot go up like a step. We have to like get it out all at the same time, but also take time to coordinate well, inform each other. And I think this conference, what we're having here, people from all around the world, from different avenues of engagement, is really important. And also for the audience, also like get in touch if you want to be like coordinate with I think like any of the initiative, but at least like for me, it's very important that we can work together and collaborate.
Thank you so much, Marie-Claire and Issa. That was really inspiring. I think from my perspective, since I've been working at the local level for so long, I really do think that our role as youth is there's not just one role, right? I mean, it's important for us to engage with our legislators. It's important for us to engage with our families, with our schools, with our friends. But I really think that our role is whatever it is that we want it to be. And by that, I mean really discovering what it is that your community needs, what your skills are, and what your interests are, and then finding out how you can be a positive agent of change in your community or in your nation. I really think the role is to become a positive agent of change. And for some people, that might be writing a letter to your legislator. That might be running for office because you are frustrated with the people that are running your community or your neighborhood or your city or your nation. For some, it might be, basically trying to bring climate education or an awareness of climate change in your neighborhood because there's a lack of understanding of it. I think however it is that we can contribute to our communities, to our campuses, to our churches, to our synagogues, whatever it is, that we should really step into that role and become a positive change agent.
Thank you, Amanda. Mira, did you have any words on this question, any words of wisdom?
Yes, I would like to say thanks to these great contributions and especially highlight the need that young people shall be agents of change and agents of new thinking also. And it is with this thinking of developing countries and the other countries, I would suggest perhaps to think in general about wealth inequality and resources inequality, because it's also within countries that there are people with huge resources and people lacking resources, and we have to rethink our societal structures in a way that everyone will have the possibility to develop one's full potential, but also engage in social responsibility and really to everyone contributing to the community on local and global levels. And the present systems are in many cases not delivering. We have systems failure. And young people, I see it very often in this Fridays for Future movement, really looking at science and scientific data, evidence, and really systemic connections, transformative change also, as Marie-Claire has mentioned it. This is where I see the biggest potential for young people to make change, really to say, we want a better world. We can envisage a better world, and let's go for it, and not accepting the world as it is now.
Thank you all so much. That was really inspiring to hear those words, and so much strength in all of those answers and so much knowledge. My second question for you all, and we touched on this, I think, briefly a little bit, but if we could delve more into this topic, I would appreciate that. What do you think are the most critical challenges that youth will have to address at this particular moment in time? And what are the most effective methods that we can use to do so? And how about with this question, we start with Marie-Claire.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rebecca, for asking this very, very critical question, because very often we are talking about the successes and what needs to be done, but we are not really talking about our own challenges we are having. And I would like to address the question in two ways. One is the personal challenges we have to overcome, and then the systematic challenges we are having. So let's start with the personal challenges, I think, are very crucial to address. And starting with a personal note, when I first went to the international climate conferences, I had good training for my NGO. I read all the documents available in the internet, even the Paris Agreement and other documents I'm not recommending to read. But I really thought, well, now I'm really good prepared. I went to the conference fully confident, and then I was there and it was a disaster. Like I didn't understand anything. I tried to catch up with everything. I was like running around. I was hungry and I didn't really know what I'm doing here. And at the end, I was completely frustrated, swearing that never ever coming back to the space. Well, I stayed there, but this is a challenge, right? No matter how young people try, and I mean, like, I could read the English material, right? There are young people who don't speak any of the languages and then cannot really engage with what is out there, right? And also, like, this conference really made me feel I'm not welcome there. I don't know enough. I'm not good enough to be even there. And this is a major challenge we as young people very often are feeling, that we are not good enough because the system is teaching us, well, unless you're not an expert and you know it all, you're not even allowed to ask a question. You shouldn't even be there. And this is exactly wrong, because young people should be there. And we shouldn't have the illusion and the imagination that we have to know everything and be an expert to be even able to speak up at these conferences. Because the conferences are here for the people and we are there and we might not know everything. So do others. I think like it's young people go there and are afraid of asking questions, while there are sitting negotiators representing their governments. They're working there and they also don't know, they don't understand everything, right? But we have somehow this imagination, which was like, it's also like self-cultivated sometimes, but it also put on us that we have to know everything until like, unless we know everything, we are not allowed to speak up. So this is a critical challenge I think we ourselves are facing. Of course, there are challenges that are coming with visa issues, with money to go there. I mean, like many countries, and there would really also echo what Miroslav, you have been mentioning. I mean, they are young people in Switzerland, could be refugees, can be poor families who can never afford to go to such a conference. Whereas they're in developing countries, they are people who okay, I just quickly. And I think we wouldn't do justice to young people who live in wealthy countries, for example, in the slums, also like outside of the New York cities, right? Who never have a chance to go to the UN headquarters in New York, who are never be able to make their voice heard. So we should really look at the very detailed way how young people can be included. And then the second point, the systemic one, that as mentioned, second row. Okay, my internet in Switzerland has also some challenges. So concluding on my second point, that despite Yango as a privileged network who has access to the spaces, we are still sitting in the second row. So young people are still excluded from decision making, despite we would have the knowledge and we could bring very valuable information to the table. So there is a system which has been put on us, and which is not allowing meaningful youth participation in the first place. And of course, we can try to do a little bit more inclusion. We can try, of course, to support more young people who can come to this conference. But unless young people are not sitting in decision-making structures and not able to make their voice truly heard, it will always be a challenge, no matter how hard we're trying and how many young people we are going to bring to these conferences.
Marie-Claire, I had almost the same exact experience when I went to COP19 and COP21. I felt so out of place and like I probably shouldn't be there. But, a couple of years later, I realized how important it was for me to believe in myself, and that really what you need initially to create any change is to believe that you can make a difference. So I really applaud you for speaking out about that. So I think that there's so many different kinds of challenges that young people are dealing with right now, which is kind of remarkable that we're so hopeful about our own future that we're actually focused on trying to make a difference. I think one challenge that existed before the pandemic and is now much more heightened during the pandemic is unemployment for youth. Because I think that so many young people around the world are unsure about their futures. And when you're unsure about how you're going to support yourself or your family, it gives you little room to think about anything else. And I think that what we have to really remember is that when we fight for climate action, what we are literally fighting for is so much more than reducing carbon emissions and stopping sea level rise. What we're fighting for is equality. We're fighting for gender equality. We're fighting against food poverty. And we are fighting for a better economy globally around the world. If we were to fight for climate action, think about how many different kinds of millions of jobs we would be able to put out into the world, from advising and consulting to technological advances and innovative ideas to even trying to create curriculums around the world so that young people know what climate change is by the time they graduate. I actually get to teach world sustainability on Wednesday nights for undergraduates in New Jersey. And it's been such an interesting experience for me, because even in the United States, these students are in college and they're really concerned about not only getting a job, but also getting a job that they really care about. Over half of millennials around the world and young people around the world really want to be in a career that they really care about, where they're contributing to the world. And I think because of this real need that there is for young people to have a fulfilling job, or any kind of job at this point, I think we're creating opportunities for ourselves. I think that we are creating opportunities to collaborate with other youth around the world. And that has been really exciting for me to see, not only here at the local level where it's happening, but also on the global level. So I just think that one of the, that's an important challenge that we need to recognize. And I think that the solution to unemployment is a way, by taking climate action, is another way of getting people to get involved in climate action, is recognizing that this is not just about surviving, but it's also about thriving.
Thank you, Amanda. Miro, what are your thoughts on this question?
The biggest that we need a systemic transformation of our societies towards low carbon societies and climate neutral societies, and this has three elements. One is a cultural innovation component, one is a social innovation and structures innovation component, and one is a digital innovation component. And the first step in which also young people need to be more engaged is that we understand that everyone needs to aim to become climate neutral. It is also the role of young people to envision for themselves a climate neutral lifestyle, and then from having a clear idea of what they want to do, what they want to achieve, they can then also see, okay, this is a structural problem that I have in my family, in my city, and so. And then once you really have this devotion to become climate neutral, then you will take the necessary step, and then we will make one step after another, and then demanding from those who are the gatekeepers towards climate neutrality to really make the necessary changes, but really to be aware that it's not enough to go to the street. One needs to really individually aim, find the way to climate neutrality, and on the way to this climate neutrality, we will change the societal structure. So this cultural change is the most important thing we have to aim, and we are framing it in our organization as a good life. We have to develop new ethical and concrete standards for citizenship, and that everyone aims to be climate neutral and contributing to the common good on the local and global level. And once we all aim for a good life, we will build a better world.
Thank you, Miro. And Usa, what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you for getting back to me. Actually, you see, if one breaks down your question in any possible aspect, I think all of them have been covered by the insightful comments from other fellow panelists of mine. So I think that I would only be touching upon and expanding upon their points now. I think the biggest problem that I thought was no representation on government levels, and I think I couldn't explain it or talk about it better than Marie Claire did. So you see, when we talk about going to international committees or international forums to talk about this, and we're sitting in the second row, or we're not being able to communicate clearly, or we aren't given the opportunity to, for that matter. So I think these are primarily linked to people or individuals or youth that already have these platforms. But we must also realize that youth, no matter how privileged it is or in which part of the world it is, it can have the ideas, it can have revolutionary ideas like any other youth can. So what I essentially mean by that is, in developing countries, um, I'm sure a lot of revolutionary ideas will come out of that, but amidst poverty, amidst the inflation, amidst the unstable government policies and unstable economies, with so many personal problems and societal problems surrounding the youth, they're barely able to think out of their immediate problems, and that bars them from coming up with good solutions. Now, if we say that since we do not have serious efforts from the governments and authorities to give them platforms, so we might as well move on to technological means of conveying our messages to the world. I think that's a very good method. It's also climate friendly, but look at the con of that, or the disadvantage to that, and that is, if it is not monitored, and which is likely the case in developing countries where parents do not have time or do not have the awareness of how to use technology. And when a minor, for instance, or a very young kid is using technology and it isn't monitored, imagine the exposure to negativity and toxicity, or the negative space he would be exposed to, affecting his mental health, affecting his own opinions, and you see, so on and so forth. So I think technology isn't a sustainable method. I am fully in favor of moving towards technology, but then again, usage of technology must be monitored. And if it is not, it could have devastating effects rather than advantages, right? So yeah, that is to touch upon how technology could not be a very sustainable method of moving towards expressing yourselves more clearly. And when I talk about, you see, unemployment, Amanda raised a very valid point. So I, yeah, I've mentioned this before here as well, that I formulated a plan which exactly matches what Amanda has said, that youth is technology literate. You see, in Pakistan alone or in any developing country, the number of unemployed youth is thrice as much as the unemployment in other sectors of the population. So this technology must realize this youth is technology literate, which means that if there are mechanisms that can bring this technology literate youth in tandem with businesses which need technology to get working again, and they aren't working right now because of, for instance, lockdowns, or for instance, not being able to adapt to technological advancements, we could bring about an overall stimulation of the economy by helping those businesses revive, and at the same time giving the youth employment opportunities. So that is to touch upon, very briefly, the biggest problem, in my opinion, is also that youth isn't being given any opportunities, and if it tries to find opportunities on its own, and if they aren't monitored, they could be very devastating. And there should be authorized mechanisms that can bring this technology in touch with sources where it can get employment, and sustainable one that is.
Thank you. So that was a very great perspective, and I think that was a well-rounded discussion. And like you said, we really did touch on, all the ways, all of the critical challenges and how we can address them. So thank you all. My next question, I think here we'll start with Miro, and then we'll move to Uswa, and then Marie Claire and Amanda. So we have seen in recent years major global climate agreements be made, such as the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Climate Agreement, and the outcomes of COP25. We have also seen large-scale youth action demanding that countries speed up our timeline in addressing climate change. So as we approach COP26, which will occur this November, what changes must we make, do you believe that we must make as a society, both locally and globally, in order to achieve SDG 13?
Yeah, so thank you very much for this question, because it's really at the heart of what our organization is trying to do. It's really our belief that youth climate action is a potential. Young people have this entrepreneurial spirit, new ideas and everything, and the energy, but society needs to create an enabling framework, an enabling ecosystem. And here I will show you some information about what our organization and myself personally, what we are doing to give an idea of how this transition of society towards helping young people to come from ideas to action looks like. So I said that it is this in the UNFCCC process, the Action for Climate Empowerment policy area is really one of the entry points and an innovation space where new changes, governance changes can be implemented that are for the global level, but also for lower levels of societal organization. And here, especially the issue of public participation, involving all stakeholders in decision making and implementation. And here, my organization is working with the Austrian Federal Ministry for Climate Action, who has set up the ACE-AT project. And this project aims to rethink and reorganize Action for Climate Empowerment towards all of society empowerment for climate action. And the United Nations Climate Change Secretariat is the lead partner here, and the education, communication, and outreach stakeholder community within the UNFCCC process is an associated partners, and ICLEI, which is a network of cities and local sustainability initiatives. And we are working on rethinking and reorganizing this ACE program. And my organization is also working on developing a feasibility study and a business plan for a global Action for Climate Empowerment non-party stakeholders support structure, setting even up an office here in Austria as a quasi-international organization of parties, meaning member states and non-state actors working together, developing also new mechanisms and frameworks for resource mobilization, including carbon footprint compensation, voluntary carbon taxes on city level and on national level, and also a digital global Action for Climate Empowerment platform. And so this is our avenue to get towards more youth climate action empowerment, where we are planning to have activities in the context of the All for Climate program campaign of the Italian COP26 co-presidency. There's a call for proposals open now. Everyone can submit proposals. The aim is to develop also digital tools, a platform and app where people will have pathways to a good life, decision support mechanism and incentive mechanisms, also crypto stamps where individual contributions to climate action and those outcomes of climate action will be somehow captured and created into digital assets, which can then be collected and sold and other points. And an important area is also knowledge, building the knowledge base for youth and digital transformation focused action for climate empowerment. That's a research program that we are setting up now in the framework of the Austrian Climate Research Program. And it will be a combination of basic research on transformation science, applied systems analysis and model development, where we put the citizen and the young person at the center and then create a framework, a coordinates mechanism in which we then can put in the different theories of change, and then also applied action research in the on the programs that and pilots that are planned within the ACE-AT project. And yeah, that's just how we think that the society, the global society, the global structures in a multi-level governance context can really change systemically, because we need disruptive change. Currently, we are on a terrible pathway, and we need innovation on all levels. And the young people are the innovation partners of society. Without the new ideas, it will not be possible.
Thank you. I'm excited to hear about that progress that you all are making in creating that framework. That's very exciting. Uswa, I know that earlier you proposed, some ideas around a green economy, and I'm not sure if you want to elaborate on that or add on to that as well.
Thank you for giving me this floor again. So yeah, I would touch upon that. I would go into the details of those projects, but you see, those are financial details or how if I'm actually going to get into practicing those projects, how I would go about doing that. But essentially, as I've mentioned earlier as well, it revolves around helping community building and helping the people in need moving online in their transition from a physical workplace to an online workplace. So it is essentially that would reduce carbon emissions and reduce power consumption. But in addition to that, I find it ironic how world leaders or international diplomats or country representatives might travel from their country to a place of common meeting, for instance, an international organization, via their own planes or their government planes, and they travel there and they sit there with new plastic bottles of water in front of them to drink if in case they get thirsty, and then they come back through those airplanes into their country, and then they travel in their cars and tell the world, okay, we talked about this and we talked about that. But you imagine the irony of this. They're traveling through planes, which are huge contributors to carbon emissions. And then they're using new plastic bottles, which are huge contributors to pollution. So I find it so ironic how government policies can be so double standard. So, what I essentially think could be a great solution to that would be, I think, to stem these practices in the first place. Because you see, we talk about bringing a change in or a consciousness at grassroots levels by, for instance, introducing these matters into the curriculum so that children might be able to grow up with these ideas and might be able to make their own solutions to these problems. But I think, especially in a developing country, or even if it's not a developing country, even if it is a developed country, an individual would need an incentive to start working on climate change in his own individual capacity. And that incentive would be given to him only when he sees examples of making large corporates and regulating large corporates to align with the international standards for instance, climate action. And what I mean by that essentially is that corporates are huge contributors to pollution and environment. So why not tax them first? Why not set a limit for them first? What I mean by that is you tell those corporates that you see this is your limit of carbon emissions. If you exceed your limit of carbon emissions, we're going to tax you. And in this way, you see, this is an idea that came out of youth. I heard it from someone and I added my own ideas to that. Youth gives these ideas, youth comes up with ideas of using textile waste to make mattresses which are then given to needy people. Youth comes up with ideas to reuse plastic into making roads which are more sustainable than tar roads. So these are ideas that are coming out of the youth. So if they're educated from the grassroots level, that's very great, but to incentivize them to start working on it, they must be given an example, and the example would be set for them by regulating the environmental behavior and the behavior of corporates towards climate. And by what I mean by that is to tax them if they exceed a certain limit of carbon emissions. And that is my idea. And before the government goes on to regulate corporates which are operating in their countries, they must regulate their own ministers or representatives that travel by air to online to international committees to discuss climate change. Isn't that ironic and so paradoxical? So essentially what I mean by that, I'll summarize it all for you. My ideas in a nutshell are that examples must be set at a mass level, at a very big level for individuals to get incentivized and to start working in their own individual capacities. For instance, planting a seed or planting a new plant, or so on and so forth. There are so many ways individuals can come up with if they see that governments and there is a collective effort towards moving towards a greener economy on the government level or on the corporate level. So that is my stance on it.
We just have a couple minutes for this question before we get into our last question, but Marie-Claire, I'll turn it over to you and then Amanda.
Yeah, very quickly, and thank you so much for the previous speakers. So first, what changes do we have to take? We have to take very, very deep, radical, and profound changes because the current system is not going to bring us where we have to be. So I think this is like really to like set like the baseline. And I think with this radical and deep changes, there's of course a lot of fear coming with it, a lot of uncertainties amongst young people, amongst older people. And that's why we have to work together to make this transformation happen. And we can only make this happen if we have an approach and being honest to ourselves. And sometimes say like, well, I just don't know how this is going to be. But in my imagination, it's going to be better than it is today. We don't have to know all the steps to make it happen, because at the moment, I mean, the rate we are at the moment, like pushing our whole system at the brinks of the collapse, we also don't know what's going to happen in a half a year, what's going to happen in a year. So we just pretend to be sure that we know and have everything under control, while actually everything is out of control. So we don't have to know all the steps we're taking, but we have to have a vision. And I think very often amongst young, but also amongst the whole global society, we lack of having a common vision and where we actually want to go. I mean, we in the call and also our audience, we of course have some sort of a vision where we want to go. But I see this lack, unfortunately, of this global imagination with the Agenda 2030, with the Paris Agreement. We do have some sort of a vision, whereas of course not touching upon all of our points. So I really think that we have to work in an intergenerational, intercultural approach closer together. We shouldn't try to divide ourselves by the system, like, oh, well, you're from the global north, you're from the global south, you're coming from a city, you are not, you're a woman, you're a man. I mean, this all doesn't matter. Either we're going to survive kind of collectively or we don't. And if we're not getting over our divides, which the system, and we are part of the system, are putting on us every single day, we are not going to make it. So just like this was, of course, like a very global metaphorical level, but I think it's just very, very important to put it out, because there are no like small little fixes and we're going to make it, because this is like time past for this.
Very good points, everyone. I think, Rebecca, the question you had originally spoke about SDG number 13. And I just wanted to ensure that everyone knows how important SDG number 13. I think that if we look back at any kind of revolution around the world, that it really just initially started with a social movement, people with a unified message. And I think that's what we really need right now. And it is to recognize the fact that all of the social issues that we all care about around the world is really just one issue. And we can have a unified message to ensure that all voices are heard and that our future is protected. And that could be about climate action. Because like I said before, it's not just about sea level rise and carbon emissions. It's about, food poverty. It's about gender equality. It's about race equality. So I just wanted to mention that because SDG number 13 is one of my favorites for that very reason.
Thank you all, especially at that last part, Amanda. I think that's a great point. This is really something that we can unite around, and getting at all the points that were brought up earlier. Marie-Claire saying, either we survive or we don't. We have to come together in this moment. It's so critical. Just want to emphasize that. So my final question to you all today, in our last 7 minutes or so, is going to be one about hope. I like to leave these calls with a sense of motivation and optimism for our future. So why should youth be hopeful for the future of our planet? And what youth-led movements have brought you hope for the future? We'll start here with Amanda.
I think that young people need to be hopeful about our future because we absolutely have to be. Because I don't want you to give up on me, and I don't want to give up on you, essentially. We're, around the world, we are very hopeful about our future because of one another and because we don't give up on each other. That's exactly why I do what I do, because I know how important it is, and not only for my future, but for everyone else's future. And a youth-led movement that has really been inspiring me here in the United States. I've been seeing a lot of young people, particularly young women, running for office. And I think that this is one of the most important things that we could be doing all around the world, is if you can, figure out a way to get yourself in office. Because you're going to bring the fresh new ideas that everyone else thinks is not possible. And I have been working in government for 10 years, and I'll just briefly say that there's a lot of people that think that these things are not possible. And it's only because they don't have the vision or the understanding that change is possible.
Thank you, Amanda. Miro, what is your response to this question?
Yeah, so where is source of hope? One source of hope is that we are all a global family. It is really, we are here connected and we share our goals and we put together our ideas and our energy, and we are committed to working together. And with this spirit, the world will heal if we have the right visions. As Amanda, you told it wonderfully. There is no such thing as impossible. We have to really envision a positive future and not limit ourselves with existing structures. We can change everything, and together we can.
Thank you, Miro. Uswa, I'd like to hear what you think about this question and what brings you hope.
Thank you. I think this very meeting in which people from different parts of the world sitting together discussing an issue of common concern is the first example of hope I can see right in front of me at this point in time. And so many other youth-led organizations which probably might not be internationally renowned, but they certainly are think tanks locally or at school or university levels that are working for such revolutionary ideas. And I think that brings me hope. And you see, then again, climate change. You see, against COVID-19, which was a common enemy to all of us, we all united. And I see us all uniting from different parts of the world against climate change as well. And I think that's a great first step towards tackling this together, as it is a common problem to all of us, and we must also work towards it together. So I think, yeah, since we all know that we're working together, and then again, we've talked about how revolutionary youth's ideas can be and if they can be implemented. So yeah, I think everyone must be hopeful for the future. But along with the hope, we must also take practical steps. And those practical steps, I think, have been talked about a lot in this meeting. So yeah, I would rest my argument with that.
Thank you, Uswa. And finally, Marie-Claire.
Yeah, absolutely. We have seen throughout history that when marginalized groups have been standing up, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement, we have been seeing women who are standing up for their rights, indigenous people for the land protection. So when these marginalized groups have been standing up and have been demanding collective action and got the support from other groups who are currently in privileged positions, we have so often seen the change coming. And I think now it's also really supported by so much global scientific evidence that no one who is somehow like reasonable can argue against it. And now the only missing piece is the will to implement it. And I think we are getting there very soon. And hopefully we can use the corona pandemic to use it as a fresh start and not go back together, but we go forward together and use this unprecedented opportunity in history to make these changes happen.
Thank you so much, all of you, for those final responses. I know that I'm left with a great sense of motivation, of passion, renewed passion for this issue. I'm sure many of you on our panel, the four of you, and a lot of our attendees today probably understand, the existential nature of this issue and how exhausting it can be And so this message of unity, of a global family, of looking for support in other movements globally and seeing that that combined strength, I think gives us a lot of power and definitely renewed passion for this issue. So with that, we're going to wrap up this session. Thank you all so much for listening, and thank you to the four of you for joining us today. It was great to speak with you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
It was a great honor